The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against the velvet expanse of space, their cold light casting faint reflections on the polished hull of the alien vessel. Inside, a young human soldier named Elias sat rigidly in a chair that seemed to mold itself around him, its surface shifting and adjusting as if alive. His hands rested uneasily on his knees, fingers twitching with the remnants of adrenaline from the skirmish he had survived just hours earlier. The room was unlike anything he had ever seen. Walls that pulsed softly with an inner glow, furniture that seemed to breathe, and air thick with an unfamiliar scent, both metallic and floral at once. Elias's mind raced, replaying the events that had led him here. He had been part of a reconnaissance mission on the outskirts of a contested planetary system when his squad encountered what they thought were hostile forces. Instead, they found themselves face to face with beings far beyond their comprehension. Tall, elegant creatures with skin that shimmered like liquid mercury and eyes that glowed faintly, shifting colors with every emotion. They called themselves the Luminari, a species known for their advanced technology and enigmatic culture. Before Elias could fully process the situation, his squad mates were incapacitated by some unseen force, leaving him alone and disarmed in front of their leader. Now, he waited. The Luminari had not harmed him but instead brought him aboard their ship, treating him with a mixture of curiosity and reverence. A strange calm settled over him despite the surreal circumstances, though his heart still hammered against his ribs. He couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen, something that would alter the course of his life forever. As Elias wrestled with his thoughts, the door slid open silently, revealing a figure who commanded attention without effort. She stepped into the room with grace that bordered on otherworldly, her presence filling the space like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Her name was Amara, crown princess of the Luminari Empire, and she carried herself with an elegance that made even the most regal humans seem clumsy by comparison. Her silvery hair cascaded down her back in waves, catching the ambient light and scattering it into tiny rainbows. Her eyes, large and luminous, shifted between hues of violet and gold as she regarded him, betraying emotions too complex for words. Amara moved closer, her steps soundless yet deliberate, each motion imbued with purpose. She wore flowing robes that seemed woven from starlight, shimmering faintly as if infused with energy. Around her neck hung a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, glowing faintly with an inner radiance. It was clear from the way the other Luminari deferred to her that she held immense power, yet there was no arrogance in her demeanor, only an intense focus, as if she saw something in Elias that others could not. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Amara tilted her head slightly, studying him with an expression that mingled fascination and determination. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was melodic, carrying a resonance that seemed to vibrate deep within his chest. "You are brave," she said simply, her words tinged with admiration. Few humans would stand so resolute in the face of the unknown. Elias swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. There was something disarming about her gaze. It wasn't piercing or intimidating, but rather searching, as if she sought to understand him on a level deeper than mere observation. I don't know what you want from me," he admitted, his voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside him. Amara's lips curved into a soft smile, one that seemed to hold secrets older than time itself. "What I want is simple, though perhaps difficult for you to comprehend," she replied, her tone gentle yet unwavering. "My family wishes us to be married." The words hit Elias like a meteor strike, shattering any semblance of composure he had managed to maintain. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he thought he might have misheard her. But the look in her eyes told him otherwise. They were filled with earnestness, with a conviction that left no room for doubt. "Married?" he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "But why? We've only just met." Amara's smile softened further, though her gaze remained steady. "Among my people, such unions are not born of fleeting affection or convenience. They are forged out of necessity, destiny, and the alignment of two souls whose paths intersect for a greater purpose." She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "Our families believe this union will bring peace, a bridge between your kind and mine, a chance to heal centuries of misunderstanding and mistrust." Elias felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted, leaving him unmoored. Everything about this moment defied logic, clashed with everything he knew about relationships, love, and duty. Yet, as he stared into Amara's luminous eyes, He couldn't deny the sincerity in her voice or the weight of the responsibility she placed before him. This wasn't just about him. It was about two civilizations teetering on the brink of either harmony or destruction. And somehow, impossibly, he had been chosen to play a pivotal role. Amara extended a hand toward him, her movements fluid and deliberate. "Come," she said softly, her voice laced with quiet urgency. "There is much to show you, much to explain. If you are willing, that is." Elias hesitated, torn between disbelief and a growing sense of inevitability. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he reached out and took her hand. It was cool to the touch, yet radiated a warmth that seemed to seep into his very bones. As their fingers intertwined, he felt a spark, an inexplicable connection that transcended language, species, and reason. Whatever lay ahead, he realized, would change him forever. Amara led Elias through the labyrinthine corridors of the Luminari vessel, her hand still clasped firmly in his. The walls around them seemed alive, pulsating with soft, rhythmic lights that responded to their presence. As they walked, she began to speak, her voice weaving a tapestry of history and tradition that painted a vivid picture of her world. "Our customs are ancient," she explained, her tone reverent. "Marriage among the Luminari is not merely a bond between two individuals, but a sacred covenant meant to unite families, clans, and sometimes entire factions. It is believed that such unions are guided by the stars themselves, preordained long before the participants are born." Elias listened intently, his mind struggling to reconcile her words with the reality of his own upbringing. In his culture, marriage was often rooted in personal choice, love, and mutual understanding. The idea of being bound to someone based on celestial alignment or familial decree felt foreign, almost archaic. Yet, as Amara continued, her passion for her traditions became infectious. "When our elders first proposed this union, I admit I was skeptical," she confessed, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "But then I met you and I saw something extraordinary, a strength and resilience that mirrors the qualities we value most in our leaders. You carry the spirit of survival, Elias, and that is rare." Her words stirred something deep within him, a flicker of pride mixed with unease. He wanted to ask questions. How could they possibly know he was the right person? What if he failed to live up to their expectations? But before he could voice his concerns, they arrived at a grand chamber bathed in golden light. At its center stood an intricate sculpture resembling a tree with branches reaching toward the heavens, each limb adorned with glowing orbs that pulsed in sync with their surroundings. "This is the Hall of Celestial Bonds," Amara said, gesturing toward the sculpture. "Here, we honor those who have united under the guidance of the stars. Your name will join theirs if you accept this path." She turned to face him, her expression solemn yet hopeful. "It is not just my family who desires this union, Elias. Our people see it as a beacon of hope, a chance to end centuries of tension between humans and Luminari. Do you understand what I am asking of you?" Elias felt the weight of her words settle heavily upon him. This wasn't just about him and Amara, it was about bridging worlds, forging alliances, and perhaps even preventing war. But the enormity of the task threatened to overwhelm him. How could he, a simple soldier, bear the burden of such expectations? "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I'm not sure I can be what your people need." Amara stepped closer, her luminous eyes locking onto his. "No one expects perfection, Elias. All they ask is that you try, to trust, to learn, and to grow alongside me. Together, we can build something greater than either of us could achieve alone." Her words carried a quiet certainty, a promise that resonated deeply within him. For the first time since arriving on the ship, Elias allowed himself to consider the possibility, not just of accepting her proposal but of embracing the destiny that seemed to beckon him forward. As Elias grappled with the gravity of Amara's proposal, memories of his childhood flooded back, painting vivid pictures of a life steeped in tradition and expectation. Raised in a military family where duty often overshadowed personal desires, he had learned early on the weight of responsibility. His father, a decorated officer, had instilled in him the values of honor and sacrifice, while his mother, a historian, filled his evenings with tales of heroes who had changed the course of history through sheer determination. These stories, once sources of inspiration, now felt like echoes of the path laid before him, a path where personal choice bowed to the needs of the many. Yet, as much as these lessons shaped him, they also created fractures within his soul. Growing up, Elias had always felt the pull of two opposing forces: the desire to carve out his own identity versus the obligation to uphold the legacy of his family. He remembered the countless dinners where his father's stern gaze would bore into him, demanding updates on his progress in the academy. Success was not optional. It was expected. Failure was not just a setback but a betrayal of everything his family stood for. The pressure had been suffocating at times, leaving him yearning for a freedom he could never quite grasp. Amara watched him closely as these thoughts played across his features, her luminous eyes softening with understanding. "You carry burdens heavier than most," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm against the storm raging within him. "I see it in the lines of your face, in the way your shoulders tense when you think no one is looking." Her words startled him, not because they were untrue but because they came from someone who barely knew him. And yet, in that moment, he felt seen in a way he hadn't in years. "I didn't choose this life," Elias admitted, his voice low and raw. "Not really. It was chosen for me, long before I had a say in anything. My parents, they wanted me to follow in their footsteps, to become someone they could be proud of. But sometimes, I wonder if I'm living my life or theirs." The admission left him feeling exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't anticipated. He glanced at Amara, half expecting judgment or pity, but found neither. Instead, her expression was one of quiet empathy. "You speak of burdens," she said after a pause, "but I hear something else, a longing for meaning, for connection. Is that not why you fight? Why you risk your life for causes greater than yourself?" Her question caught him off guard, forcing him to confront truths he had buried beneath layers of duty and discipline. Yes, he fought because it gave his life purpose, because it allowed him to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But was that enough? Could he find fulfillment in a life dictated by others' expectations? Amara reached out, her cool fingers brushing against his wrist. "Among my people, we believe that true strength lies not in bearing burdens alone but in sharing them. You do not have to carry this weight by yourself, Elias. Let me help you. Let us face this together." Her words struck a chord deep within him, awakening a flicker of hope he hadn't realized still burned. For the first time, the idea of partnership didn't feel like another obligation but rather a lifeline, a chance to rewrite the narrative of his life. But even as the thought took root, doubts lingered. Could he truly step into a role so vast, so consequential? Was he capable of becoming the man Amara believed he could be? These questions swirled in his mind, unresolved, as they stood together in the golden glow of the Hall of Celestial Bonds. The sculpture loomed above them, its branches stretching endlessly skyward, a silent testament to the possibilities that awaited, if only he had the courage to reach for them. Elias's mind churned with conflicting emotions as he considered the enormity of what Amara was proposing. The weight of her expectations, and those of her people, pressed down on him, threatening to smother the fragile spark of hope her words had ignited. He had spent his life striving to meet the demands placed upon him, but this was different. This wasn't just about proving himself to his superiors or honoring his family's legacy. It was about stepping into a role that transcended individual ambition. It was about becoming a symbol, a bridge between two worlds that had long viewed each other with suspicion and fear. And yet, amidst the pressure, there was something undeniably compelling about Amara's vision. Her belief in him, though daunting, was intoxicating. She saw potential in him that he had never dared to acknowledge in himself. A capacity for leadership, for unity, for change. The thought of standing beside her, of working together to forge a new future, stirred a part of him that had lain dormant for years. But it also terrified him. What if he failed? What if their union, instead of bringing peace, only deepened the divide? Amara seemed to sense his internal struggle. She stepped closer, her presence both grounding and overwhelming. "Elias," she said softly, her voice cutting through the chaos in his mind, "you do not need to have all the answers now. No one expects you to be perfect. What matters is your willingness to try, to trust in the possibility of something greater than yourself." Her words carried a quiet authority, a reminder that she, too, had faced her own fears and uncertainties. For all her poise and confidence, she was not immune to doubt. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw the vulnerability beneath her regal exterior. Her luminous eyes betrayed a flicker of apprehension, a reflection of the same uncertainty that gripped him. In that moment, he realized she was not asking him to be fearless. She was asking him to be brave. Brave enough to embrace the unknown, to take a leap of faith not just for himself but for the countless lives that hung in the balance. "I want to believe in this," he admitted, his voice trembling with honesty. "I want to believe that we can make a difference, that we can create something meaningful. But it feels impossible. Like I'm being asked to move mountains with my bare hands." The admission left him feeling raw, stripped of the armor he had worn for so long. He braced himself for her response, half expecting her to offer reassurances or platitudes. Instead, she smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed to encompass both understanding and resolve. "Mountains are not moved in a single day," she said. "They are shaped slowly, stone by stone, by those who refuse to give up. And you, Elias, have already shown me that you possess that kind of perseverance. You survived battles that would have broken others. You stood tall when the odds were against you. That is why I believe in you. That is why we believe in you." Her faith in him was both a gift and a burden, filling him with a strange mix of gratitude and dread. He wanted to rise to the occasion, to prove worthy of the trust she placed in him. But the stakes were so high, the consequences of failure so dire, that the thought of taking even one misstep paralyzed him. What if his flaws, the cracks in his armor, undermined everything they hoped to achieve? Amara must have seen the turmoil in his eyes, because she reached out and took his hand once more. Her touch was cool and steady, anchoring him to the present. "Do not fear imperfection," she said gently. "Fear stagnation. Fear the refusal to act when action is needed. If we wait for the perfect moment, it will never come. Sometimes, the greatest courage lies in beginning, even when the path ahead is unclear." Her words resonated deeply, striking a chord that reverberated through every fiber of his being. She was right. Waiting for certainty was a luxury they could not afford. The universe did not operate on guarantees. It demanded action, even in the face of uncertainty. And yet, the leap required of him felt monumental, a plunge into waters too deep and turbulent to navigate alone. "I'm scared," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just of failing, but of losing myself in the process. Of becoming someone I don't recognize." Amara's grip on his hand tightened ever so slightly, her expression softening with compassion. "You will change, Elias. That is inevitable. But change does not mean loss. It means growth. It means becoming more than you ever thought possible. And you will not face it alone. Whatever happens, I will be by your side, every step of the way." Her promise was a lifeline, a tether to something solid in the midst of the swirling chaos. For the first time, Elias allowed himself to imagine a future where he wasn't defined solely by duty or expectation. A future where he could stand shoulder to shoulder with Amara, building something greater than either of them could achieve alone. It was a daunting prospect, fraught with challenges and sacrifices, but it was also filled with possibility, a chance to rewrite the story of his life, not as a pawn of circumstance but as a co-author of destiny. As they stood together in the golden light of the Hall of Celestial Bonds, the sculpture above them seemed to pulse with renewed energy, its glowing orbs casting shifting patterns across the walls. Elias felt the weight of the moment settle over him, heavy yet strangely liberating. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew the road ahead would be fraught with obstacles. But for the first time, he felt ready, or at least willing, to take the first step. Elias and Amara emerged from the Hall of Celestial Bonds, their footsteps echoing softly against the iridescent floors of the luminary vessel. The corridor ahead stretched into shadow, its walls alive with faint pulses of light that seemed to anticipate their passage. As they walked, the air grew charged with an electric tension, as though the ship itself recognized the gravity of the decision they were contemplating. Amara's hand remained firmly clasped in Elias's, her touch a constant reminder of the bond they were on the verge of forging, a bond that transcended species, tradition, and even time itself. "Before we proceed further," Amara said, her voice steady yet tinged with an edge of caution, "there is something you must understand. This union is not merely symbolic. It carries responsibilities far beyond what either of us may initially grasp." She paused, turning to face him fully, her luminous eyes searching his for any sign of hesitation. To marry me is to step into a role that will demand sacrifices. Sacrifices of freedom, of autonomy, and perhaps even of parts of yourself you hold dear. Elias nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as he absorbed her words. He had already begun to suspect as much, but hearing it spoken aloud crystallized the reality in a way that left no room for denial. "I know," he replied, his voice firm despite the knot forming in his stomach. "But if this is truly about creating peace, if it's about giving both our peoples a chance to coexist, then I'll do whatever it takes." Amara's expression softened, though her gaze remained unwavering. "Your willingness honors me, Elias, but let me be clear, the challenges will not come only from outside forces. My family, while supportive of this union, will expect you to adapt quickly to our ways. They will test your resolve, your loyalty, and your ability to lead alongside me. Some may doubt your suitability, questioning whether a human can truly embody the virtues they deem essential for a luminary consort." The weight of her words settled heavily on Elias's shoulders. He had faced skepticism before, endured the scrutiny of those who doubted his capabilities, but this was different. This wasn't just about proving himself to a commanding officer or earning the respect of his peers. It was about convincing an entire civilization that he was worthy of standing beside their princess. The thought was daunting, almost paralyzing, but he forced himself to meet her gaze without flinching. "If they doubt me," he said, his voice steady, "then I'll prove them wrong. Just tell me what I need to do." Amara's lips curved into a faint smile, though it carried more sadness than triumph. "Proving them wrong will require more than determination, Elias. It will require patience, humility, and an openness to learning things that may challenge everything you believe. Our customs, our values, they are not like yours. Embracing them will not be easy, especially when they conflict with the principles you've lived by all your life." Elias exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair as he processed her warning. He had always prided himself on his adaptability, his ability to navigate unfamiliar terrain and emerge stronger for it. But this was uncharted territory in every sense of the word. The Luminari were not just another faction or enemy to be understood. They were an entirely different way of being, a culture built on foundations he could scarcely comprehend. To immerse himself in their world would mean shedding pieces of his identity, adopting practices and beliefs that might feel alien, even uncomfortable. "What happens if I can't adapt?" he asked quietly, the question hanging between them like a fragile thread. "What happens if I fail? Not just them, but you?" Amara's hand tightened around his, her grip firm yet reassuring. "Failure is not an option, Elias. Not because I demand perfection, but because the consequences of faltering would ripple far beyond us. If this union falters, it could undo decades of fragile diplomacy between our peoples. Wars have been waged over less." Her words sent a chill coursing through him, though he refused to let it show. He had always known the stakes were high, but hearing her articulate the potential fallout drove home the enormity of what they were undertaking. This wasn't just about personal success or failure, it was about safeguarding the future of two civilizations. The realization was sobering, humbling, and oddly empowering all at once. "I won't let that happen," he said finally, his voice resolute. "Whatever it takes, I'll find a way to make this work, for you, for your people, and for mine." Amara studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a slow nod, she released his hand and gestured for him to follow her further down the corridor. "There is one final thing you should know," she said as they resumed their walk. "While my family supports this union, not everyone shares their enthusiasm. There are factions within the Luminari who view humans with distrust, who see this marriage as a threat to our sovereignty. They will oppose us, Elias, and their resistance may take forms we cannot yet predict." The warning hung in the air between them, heavy and foreboding. Elias felt a surge of defiance rising within him, tempered by the knowledge that blind bravado would get him nowhere. "Let them try," he said, his tone measured but fierce. "If they think I'm going to back down because they don't approve, they're mistaken. I didn't survive battlefields and near-death experiences to bow to fear or prejudice." Amara stopped abruptly, turning to face him with an intensity that took his breath away. "This is not a battlefield, Elias," she said sharply, her voice cutting through his bravado like a blade. "Warfare has no place here. If we are to succeed, We must win hearts, not battles. Violence will only reinforce the divisions we seek to heal." Her rebuke stung, but it also grounded him, reminding him of the delicate balance they were trying to strike. He nodded, swallowing his pride. "You're right," he admitted. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to suggest." "I know what you meant," she interrupted, her tone softening. "And I admire your courage. But remember this, strength is not always measured by how loudly you roar. Sometimes, it is measured by how quietly you endure." The wisdom in her words struck a chord deep within him, resonating with a truth he had long suspected but rarely acknowledged. Strength wasn't just about facing external threats, it was about confronting the doubts within oneself, the fears that whispered of inadequacy and failure. It was about finding the resilience to keep moving forward, even when the path ahead seemed impossibly dark. As they continued walking, the corridor opened into a vast chamber bathed in silvery light. At its center stood a circular platform surrounded by holographic projections of stars and planets, each image shimmering with an ethereal glow. Amara led him to the edge of the platform, her movements deliberate and graceful. "This is the Chamber of Alignment," she explained, her voice hushed with reverence. "Here, we consult the stars to seek guidance on matters of great importance. Before we proceed further, we must ensure that the cosmos approves of our union." Elias gazed at the swirling constellations above them, their light dancing across his face. For a moment, he felt a pang of doubt. What if the stars deemed him unworthy? What if fate itself conspired against them? But then he glanced at Amara, her expression serene yet resolute, and the doubt faded. Whatever the outcome, he realized, they would face it together. And that, more than anything, gave him the strength to stand tall and await the verdict of the heavens. Elias stood at the precipice of a decision that felt both exhilarating and terrifying, the culmination of days spent grappling with emotions he could scarcely name. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to cling to the familiar comforts of his old life, yet an equally powerful force urged him forward, a yearning for connection, for purpose, for something greater than himself. Amara's presence beside him was a constant reminder of what lay on the other side of fear. The possibility of unity, of bridging worlds that had long regarded each other with suspicion and hostility. Yet, as he stared into the swirling constellations above, he couldn't ignore the gnawing uncertainty that clung to him like a shadow. The stars seemed to pulse in response to their presence, their light shifting and refracting as if alive. Amara raised her hands, palms upward, and closed her eyes, her lips moving in a silent invocation. Elias watched her, awestruck by the grace and reverence she exuded. He felt out of place, a mere mortal standing in the midst of something ancient and divine. Doubts crept in, insidious whispers that questioned whether he truly belonged here, whether he was worthy of the role being thrust upon him. What if the stars rejected him? What if this entire endeavor was doomed from the start? But then Amara opened her eyes, and the intensity of her gaze silenced his inner turmoil. "The stars do not judge," she said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "They guide. They illuminate paths, but the choice to walk them is ours alone." Her words carried a weight that resonated deeply within him, stirring something primal and defiant. She wasn't asking him to surrender to fate, she was inviting him to shape it, to take ownership of the destiny unfolding before them. Elias took a deep breath, the air tinged with a faint metallic tang of the chamber. He thought of his parents, of the sacrifices they had made and the expectations they had placed upon him. Their voices echoed in his mind, urging him to honor the family name, to uphold the values they had instilled in him. But for the first time, he realized that fulfilling their legacy didn't mean sacrificing his own identity. It meant finding a way to weave his story into something larger, something that honored both his roots and the future he envisioned. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "Scared of failing you, of failing everyone who's counting on us. But I'm more scared of letting fear dictate my choices." He turned to Amara, his eyes locking onto hers with a newfound clarity. "If this is what it takes to create a better future, if this is what it takes to bring our peoples together, then I'll do it. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Amara's expression softened, a flicker of relief crossing her features. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his cheek in a gesture that was both tender and affirming. "You already honor me more than you know," she murmured. Courage is not the absence of fear, Elias. It is the willingness to act in spite of it. And that is what makes you extraordinary. Her words ignited a spark within him, banishing the last vestiges of doubt. He realized then that this journey wasn't just about duty or sacrifice, it was about transformation. About becoming someone capable of rising to the challenges ahead, not for glory or recognition, but for the sake of something greater than himself. The thought was daunting, yes, but it was also liberating. For the first time, he felt unburdened by the weight of expectation, free to embrace the unknown with open arms. Together, they stepped onto the platform, the stars above them shimmering brighter as if responding to their resolve. Amara raised her hands once more, and this time, Elias joined her, mirroring her posture. The act felt strange yet natural, as if his body instinctively understood what his mind struggled to comprehend. The constellations above began to align, their movements synchronized in a celestial dance that seemed to echo the rhythm of his heartbeat. "This is the beginning," Amara whispered, her voice filled with quiet awe. "Not just of our union, but of a new chapter for both our peoples. The stars have spoken, Elias. They have blessed our path." Elias felt a surge of emotion swell within him, a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. He didn't know what lay ahead, didn't know if he was truly ready for the trials that awaited them. But as he stood there, hand in hand with Amara beneath the watchful gaze of the cosmos, he felt a profound sense of certainty. Whatever happened next, they would face it together.